Nick, welcome to Finding Your Niche. I'm excited to have you on today. And as I do with everybody that comes on here, I just want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to everybody that's listening out there. So Nick, the floor is yours.
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me. My name is Nick. I'm the CMO of the Legends brand. We're an athletic apparel brand based in Southern California. We're here in Los Angeles. Streetwear inspired performance athletic gear. We've been around. This is our second year. We're just about at the 2-year anniversary of the launch of the brand. And we're experiencing a lot of growth. It's a super exciting time to be at the brand. Obviously a competitive industry. You've got a lot of the big players who have been around for a long time. And then you've got a lot of challenger brands who are disrupting the space. And we're excited to be a part of that segment, smaller, up and coming, disruptive, and making some waves, especially today where consumers are much more open to trying new brands and, exploring, kind of straying away from some of the more traditional brands that have maybe filled their closet for the last 20 years. And we're excited to be a part of that. And then on a personal side, so I started my career, which I'm sure we'll get into, started my career with the Adidas group on the Reebok brand, and born and raised on the East Coast up in New England, and then moved out here to head up marketing for Legends. Started the gig within the last year and actually just moved out to the West Coast in the last few months.
Yeah, you're a long way from home right now.
It's so funny. It's so funny. I walked outside today, and for the first time, you could see your breath in the air. And for weeks, everyone around here has been complaining about how cold it is, and it's 65 degrees or something on a normal day. And I'm kind of looking around, like, are you sure back home it was 32 last night?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know it's the same thing with up here. I mean, it's probably been between 20 and 40 degrees the last few weeks here, and nobody's been fazed by it at all. But I know there's people out in California that I know, and they're just like, we just got hit by this wave of cold and it's like 64 degrees. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, well, whatever. Anyways, I do want to go back to you graduating college and where your mind was at that point. Like, I know you graduated with a journalism degree. So what was your initial intent or career path you saw for yourself coming out of school?
Yeah. So I always wanted to work in sports and wanted to be in sports media. So whether that was, I had a passion for writing, I had a passion for broadcasting, wanted to be whatever it looked like, whether it was writing for a paper, which, even when I graduated college in 2009, papers were dying, but they were still a thing. Today they're much less or so. But it was the advent of podcasting. It was the start of, even blogs were new, right? Like in the early 2000s when I was in college, early mid 2000s. So there was this whole wave of digital media that was coming up, and that's where I wanted to be. When I graduated college, it was 2009. So after the big market crash and economy crash, and that started in 2008, there just weren't any jobs. So I did what I could to freelance at some newspapers and some online publications, and picked up some marketing gigs here and there, more as a way to get into sports. And by that, I mean, it was, doing promotions, hanging flyers. I mean, any kind of grunt work I could do just to connect into sports and then keep the writing going, so that someday I could merge them together. From there, I was able to land an entry-level copywriting gig at a small marketing agency in New Hampshire. I figured I can write, and copywriting wasn't necessarily my passion, but it was a way in the door into a full-time role.
So in the mid 2000s, what did a copywriting job look like? Because I know now a lot of it's digital, so you'd be writing copy for digital advertisements or social media posts or blog posts. But I'd love to hear a little bit about what it was in 2010, around that time.
Yeah, at that agency, it was less social. Not that social was still a thing, right? 2009, 2010, when I took that gig.
Right.
Instagram probably wasn't around at that time. I'm trying to think back.
I think
Twitter was huge. Facebook was still big. Yep. It was still there. But for us, it was writing copy for their emails that were going out for their clients. They were doing an event and they needed to create collateral, printed material that they were sending out that clients were going to be sending out. So it kind of ran the gamut of promotional and advertising language across digital and physical properties for any of their clients. And the clients, it wasn't super exciting clients, right? It was banking, it was insurance, it was financial services. It wasn't apparel and footwear and things that I've been able to, fortunately get into since then.
Right. And I'm sure that the writing for the I'll just call them, I don't want to call them boring clients, but I will. But for like banks and stuff, I mean, sure, there's a lot of things that you need to be very conscious of legally and logistically that are just a pain in the butt to deal with. But anyways, coming out of the copywriting role, I know you worked for Reebok and Adidas, so I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you did there and the things you learned while you were working for them.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky again. The agency I was at was so small that I was able to pick up and kind of just be a self-starter and get my hands dirty in email marketing. And sure, I write the copy, but go ahead and take the next step and learn how to set up and deploy and segment email, right? So that's one example of many where it just had to kind of pick up these skills, and was able to get an entry-level marketing role at Reebok. This was 2011. And so they were behind the game a bit in terms of e-commerce. They built their business, and same with the Adidas, Adidas brand, built their business on the wholesale model and sports. So it was come buy our stuff at Dick's Sporting Goods or at an owned store, an outlet store, or whatever. So they were behind the curve from e-com, and they were trying to ramp up quickly. They had a really good team that I was fortunate to be a part of, and was there for almost 7 years. So worked on the Reebok brand the entire time I was there, and for about 2 to 3 years of that 7, I also was on the Adidas brand, Adidas US, on the e-com marketing side. So I really pretty quickly early on carved out the niche on the retention marketing side. So I was overseeing all email marketing. They didn't have a loyalty program at the time, and they were very basic. Again, it was really early days for them in terms of e-com sophistication. I also oversaw the affiliate program, and so I was able to, because I got in as one of the earlier folks, I was able to sort of grab hold of a few channels and learn them. And by the end of it, I was doing even connecting and kind of being the digital liaison with the brand teams and with some of the trade teams, and kind of making sure that we're coming out across the board digitally, or the united and, kind of succinct message, which was really fun to get it. E-com marketing for some, it can get a little dry when it's so numbers driven. So being able to work with some of the brand teams and have some of that excitement around how we tell them the story was a lot of fun.
Right. And that's something I do want to come back to, the difference between branding and direct response, and the way you see those two things and how they interact together. Before we get into that, I'd love to hear a little bit about the agency that you ran for a little while and jumped out and started for yourself, because I'm in a pretty similar position right now as you probably were then. So I'd love to hear more about why you decided to do that, what factors were in play, and what you guys were working on.
Yeah. So once I left the Adidas group, myself and actually 2 other guys that were my closest counterparts at the Adidas group. So one guy who was actually my direct manager for years, and then the other was the head of acquisition. So I was head of retention, he was acquisition, and then our manager, right? So the 3 of us, we wanted to find a way to continue to work together. We were best friends. We still had great relationships, and we had all kind of gone our separate ways, but let's find a way to still work together. So we had kind of moonlighted just as a digital growth agency. So really focused on profitable growth for clients specific to their e-com business. Okay. We had a handful of clients that was part-time work, but it was a way to stay in touch and make some money on the side. But we found that we were, without trying, getting a lot of referrals, and a lot of clients wanted us to work for them. And we just became to a decision point of, are we going to do this full time or not? Because we can't keep taking on clients and doing part-time work just with this rate. So that was in 2000, and I guess this was probably 2017, maybe 18. And we decided let's take the jump. So 2 of us went full time, and we hired a couple people over the subsequent couple of years, and grew it to, we always had a vision of staying small. So we grew it to like 20 to 25 clients of various sizes. I mean, there were some startups that were doing less than $1 million in sales a year, and some that were doing hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Which was
20 to 25 clients is still pretty significant for probably the amount of money that was going through their e-commerce.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting though, because when in the agency, what we found and what we had heard and what we certainly experienced firsthand is when you're super small, you're very profitable. So when you're an agency of just 2 or 3 people, or even up to 4 or 5 people, but you've got 10 or so clients and almost no overhead, you're very profitable. When you get a little bit bigger than that, your profit margin comes way down, because you've got to add a handful of people, and at that point, you're always kind of chasing kind of the staffing and the hours allotment. And then when you get like over $10 million in revenue as an agency, then you become super profitable again. So we said, we didn't have any aspirations of being super big. So we didn't want to have to go through the middle area to get to something we didn't want to get to. So we said, let's stay, ideally we were going to be 15 to 20 clients max, and we ended up being 20 to 25.
Okay. Really cool. And before we jump into your transition over to Legends, I want to talk a little bit about branding versus direct response. And then I want to pull that into the work that you're doing now at Legends. So I'd love to hear your opinion on branding and direct response, and then how they're different, but then also how they work together to create a marketing strategy that's effective for companies.
Yeah, well, it's if you think about the evolution, right? Like if I even go back to my own experience and call it 2012, you had this. I was working on this ecom team where we had the quote unquote the direct response channels that we owned, right? So email, paid search, paid social was a very small play to a smaller degree back then. Display, like all the digital DR channels, and then you had all the brand channels, which was terrestrial TV and radio and billboards and events and influencers back then were not as heavily social. Back then it was like literally you're working with athletes who have a big following and they're playing on every Sunday or whatever. So you had this sort of separation of church and state, and we always saw hey, we can crush return on ad spend. Brand can't measure it. They have huge budgets. We have small budgets. There was always this sort of like friction between how these two teams operated. And I think I both saw more value in what they did. As digital has become really the place where everybody plays, those two things have blurred so greatly. Almost everything you do can have a direct response angle, because since it is digital, you probably have some means to track performance. So with that, you're going to have different expectations. Some channel might have a 5-to-1 return on ad spend, expectation, and one might have a 1.5. And that's more of your brand awareness play, right? Maybe you have a sub 1 return on your ad spend. You're okay losing those dollars, but you're measuring something else, cost per visit or net promoter score, whatever it is you're measuring. So the lines have really blurred. You still have almost everything that you can do from a brand perspective today can have some more concrete form of measurement, which makes it a little more DR. And concretely, or I would say conversely, your quote unquote DR channels, even your email marketing, I think everyone's putting a more heightened sense of awareness on making sure that it fits within your brand. So maybe less reliant on promotions, or maybe making sure your messaging is really on brand and it's not as, hey, come buy our shirt. It's really tied into the message of the product and the brand. So these things have blurred together in the way that they should. These things should have always been kind of decoupled, but they just, by nature of siloed work environments and things like KPIs, they were sort of kind of held in different regard.
Yeah. You mentioned something really interesting, and you said that pretty much everybody's moving to digital. Do you think there's still space for non-digital advertisements, both inside of COVID? Because COVID's interesting because everybody's at home now. And so a lot of companies have had to adapt and just hammer digital because that's the only way they can communicate with their customers. But I'd love to hear your opinion on whether or not there's still space in the marketing world for non-digital advertisements.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I would say in a couple different ways. So do I think people are as regularly, taking out full page ads in a magazine? Not to the same degree, for sure. Unless they're adding some kind of a DR component to it. But while the value of that is diminishing, there's two areas I think it's really important still. One is experiential. So I know COVID has put a wrench into events, especially with our brand. We built our brand on grassroots and events, and that's gone at this point. So whenever that comes to an end, experiential and events will be huge again, and can be a really strong connection point. We see so much data about, whether it's millennials or Gen Z valuing experiences over things. So how can you pull that into your marketing and provide really great experiences? That's key. That's huge. The other is I think these media platforms or media entities are finding ways to digitize the traditional. So billboards, hard to track, right? But some folks are taking the out of home space, which is what a billboard falls into, and finding ways to digitize it and let you track things a little bit more concrete. So I just think, it's twofold. Yes, you're going to have the offline, the in-person marketing that's always going to be important, but you're also going to find ways to take traditional offline channels and put measurement vehicles and measurement levers against them, which is going to make them more viable for anybody to use.
Super interesting. And so I want to transition into a question that I'm super excited to ask you. We've talked a lot about branding and positioning and just marketing in general. and I want to hear what you were thinking through as you came into Legends. So I'm not sure how much contact you had on Legends before you got in, but your first, let's say, month or 2 months on the job. I know Legends is still a relatively new company, so you guys probably had a lot to work through in terms of branding and positioning, and just your marketing strategy as a whole. So I'd love to hear what you were thinking through in order to build out your marketing strategy for your company.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say candidly, we're still working through a lot of these things. So, but I'll take a step back before I even joined, and what was relayed to me in part of my exploration of Legends that led to me joining is I think they carved out a really interesting niche in the marketplace. So earlier in this conversation, we talked about, you've got the old guard in the athletic apparel, right? You've got Nike, Adidas, Under Armour, Reebok, etc. And then you've got this wave of disruptors. So Lululemon was probably the first really big one, and they were the first and thus are the biggest. But you've also got folks like Rhone, Viore, 10,000, ASRV, all these brands that are coming up and are breaking into the space and being disruptive. But most of those brands are charging, let's use shorts as an example, they're charging $80, $90, $100 for shorts, right? The old guard have such big market share, and because of volume and whatever else, they're charging, they have a range, but their core shorts are probably more like 35, 45, 50 bucks, right? So we found a space that there's this middle ground. You can still offer the exciting new brand, the challenger brand, the premium experience at a $60 short, which is what we're selling. So you're paying a little more for that premium quality, but you don't have to spend $100 on a pair of shorts. So from a pricing perspective, that's where we fit in really nicely. From a brand perspective, we also kind of straddle those two lines, because the old guard, I'll keep referring to them as that, are the sports forward. We make you run faster, jump higher, lift more, win at all costs. And then you've got the newer brands who tend to have a little less aggressive approach to their marketing, right? So it's hey, we make apparel for guys to do yoga in and actually feel comfortable. It's your lounge around wear. It's a little less aggressive, even in their sports lens. Yeah. And we play in the middle. We're high performance gear, and we are big in basketball and lacrosse and football. And we've got pro athletes wearing our stuff all the time, but we're also a lifestyle and an athleisure look with streetwear inspiration. So you can look good, when you're not working hard, when you are, but the gear's still going to hold up. So they found a really good white space from a brand perspective of where they can fit in. We need to do a little more research. We're in the process of doing a lot of customer research and a whole brand initiative, but we need to refine our message and, get this kind of locked in a little bit more clearly for the consumer to understand our true value. So that's been one of the first things I've taken on since I jumped on board here, is this kind of, I won't call it repositioning. It's more clearly articulating our brand positioning.
Right. And adding on top of that, what are you doing right now in order to, I'm just going to say, drive your business forward with your marketing? Like how are you communicating with your customers, and how are you getting people to buy?
Yeah. So before I came on board, 80, maybe even 90% of spend was all paid social. And I think that's a really good place to start for new brands, because that's where there's just such an audience there, and you can learn a lot by spending, in some cases, a little bit of money and still learn a lot, depending on how you're going to set up your campaigns in terms of what messaging works, what creative works, what kind of targeting works. So great place to start. They grew the business with that and influencer. So influencer for them being non-paid. It's our investors, our current and former athletes that are really well connected. Our CEOs really well connected. And have athletes reach out all the time saying, hey, I love your gear. Can I try it out? And we'll send them free product. So I really bare minimal, no tracking, no strategy, but seed the hell out of influential folks, do some really cool events, and then spend money in paid social. That's how they started. Today, we're still doing that stuff, but we've diversified our channel mix digitally. So even some of the basics like ramping up paid search, display retargeting, right? A really basic, less incremental channel, but make sure you're capturing the demand that's in the market. Some of these newer initiatives that we're going to get into is launching the ambassador program within the next 60 days, which we think will be a really big growth lever for next year. We're thinking about, what does loyalty look like for us? I don't like the traditional, for this brand, I don't like the traditional, buy more and earn rewards sort of, punch cardy approach. But we have such access to, again, amazing events and amazing people and amazing product and partners. How do we surprise and delight our most valuable and loyal buyers by leveraging those other entities that we have and providing access, free product, discounted product, whatever it might be. So that's some of the things we're thinking about for next year.
Cool. Who are you guys gonna try to target with your ambassador program?
So I've built it out, I guess. So like I talked about, we're always going to have these really influential NFL athlete, NBA athlete who reaches out and wants our gear, and we're always going to we'll give them gear, but because we don't sponsor athletes in the traditional sense, like we don't pay, here's $100,000 to wear our stuff for the next year. So that's like its own kind of program. The ambassador program is more people who range from, say, 5,000 to 100,000 of an audience socially, or maybe they have more of an offline audience. They're a really influential trainer that trains, pro athletes, even if they don't have a big social following. And we've kind of split it up into verticals of sports, fitness, and I know there's some gray lines there, but if you can define sports and fitness as two different categories, and then art, which for us, art is typically like street art or music, graffiti art, that sort of stuff. And then the fourth bucket being surf, skate, and outdoor. So that whole category. So we'll look for folks across those four verticals that align with our brand values and our look, and then different ranges of audience. And then we're going to learn some stuff. I mean, that's our going in plan, but you always have a plan, and it changes as you learn things. So we'll see a year from now, we might have a totally different strategy, but that's what we're rolling out.
Right. Well, you guys you're still only 2 years into it, so there's still a ton to learn, I'm sure. Are you fully e-commerce right now, or do you have your goods in any stores?
We don't have any stores. We don't own any stores, and we really don't do traditional wholesale. So you're not going to find us in a Dick's Sporting Goods or even a trend account like a high-end sneaker boutique right now. We really want to control the customer experience. Our number one pillar as a brand is the customer experience. So we have our own fulfillment center right here on the property. We don't use a third-party logistics company. That allows us to get products out the door super fast. We want to own the customer experience digitally. So almost everybody that's buying is coming directly to us, and we can really see that end to end. So for now, that's what we do. We also want to control kind of where we're showing up and how we're showing up in the marketplace. We still need to land our brand, so that's important. We have some folks that reach out that want to buy a few hundred units for their gym, and they want to put their gym logo on it, and they're not selling them. So we have some non-e-com, more bulk sales, some teams, things like that. But 90% of our business is direct to consumer online.
Cool. Really cool. Well, that's all I have for you, Nick. This has been just a super, super fascinating conversation for me, because we dove into a lot of things, marketing specific. And then we also learned a little bit about you and all the things that are happening over at Legends. So thank you for coming on. I want to close it out with one last question for you. What is the one thing in marketing that is being underutilized by people right now that every company should be doing?
One thing being underutilized. I guess I would say, I don't know if it's underutilized is the right word, but I would say not. I think right now everyone's so focused on customer acquisition, whether it's because they have VC funding and it's all about growth, or they want to sell their brand in a couple of years and be acquired. So it's all about growth. I think it's easy for folks to overlook the retention side of the house. Maybe I'm guilty of it too, right? I said we're going to launch an ambassador program, and then we're going to look at maybe launching some sort of loyalty, right? Taking care of your existing customers and driving that lifetime value just opens up so many doors in terms of what you can do economically and how it changes the shape of your business. I think everyone's in this acquire now, get more customers as cheaply as you can, that less attention is being paid to keep the ones we have and really extend that lifetime value. So I guess that's where I would go with it.
Awesome. Well, Nick, thanks for coming on today. If you want to stick around for a few minutes afterwards, I'm happy to chat. And you've got a customer in me now. So in terms of lifetime value, I'm not sure how much I will throw your way, but I think you got a customer in me for the rest of my life. You guys have an incredible brand.
Thanks, Jake. I appreciate it.
You bet.